Now we have approximately 8 to 10 minutes for questions. So, oh yes, and I would like to invite both Abigail and Veronica just to the stage.
I was thinking while you were talking about how difficult it is and unprepared we are to deal with the kinds of the fears that our children are going through, and I wanted to just share a recent anecdote that I felt so completely unprepared, because when the whole thing with the Greta Thunberg has come and the Fridays for the Future, before that I was talking with my two kids, 12 and 10, and I was showing them a video of Greta speaking, and we were talking about whether they were going to, not go to school on Friday, and we've talked a little bit about that. And so I showed them a video of Greta speaking, and I thought I was showing them something in a way that was talking about an issue, but showing like a young kid who can do something, and my kids have been a little active in that. And then after looking at the video and talking a little bit about climate change, I had no idea, but my daughter started crying uncontrollably. And I felt so completely ill-equipped, and feeling like, how did I just do this? How did I not realize that, I thought I was doing something that was going to make her feel empowered, like a kid can have power, and yet I created that experience to her. So it's just an anecdote to say that, we can feel so completely unprepared. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's, when we do things, we only have our children's best interests at heart, but no one's really told us how to deal with these issues. And so often I see, parents want to raise socially aware children, and it's really hard to know. So I have 16-year-olds and 18. My two younger children are 16 and 18, and they both went on the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. They drove, I don't know if you know, many buses from the Twin Cities drove overnight all the way to Washington, D.C. for the March for Our Lives, and then drove all the way back. And, the thing is, it's really hard to figure out what is us wanting our children to engage in these issues, and what is our children, where they are in terms of their readiness to engage in these issues. In fact, when I was writing the book, one of the editors at the publishing house said that, she had another author who, would bring her 2-year-old to hold signs, climate change is next to, and bring them to what does that 2-year-old understand? And we also, as adults, we talk, like when I asked who's scared, a lot of people raise their hands, we're scared. But it's really terrifying for a child to see their parent being scared. That is terrifying for a child. Like I like to say, there's nothing more terrifying to a child than a terrified parent. So it's really tricky. And I think, 10, 12 years old, they're just on the cusp where they're ready for their own things, but we're not 10 and 12, so we don't necessarily understand where they're at. So it's really a tricky thing, and that's why we sort of talk about emotions. I think it's talking about the emotions and talking about the issues. And we conflate them often, but they're separate things. Yeah. But thank you.
If I may add, I was just in a conference in London, a pediatric conference, and there was a specialist on anxiety, and she was talking like there's this new denomination, and it's called climate anxiety, and how terrified the children are, because when they're talking about anxiety and they're presenting you have this timing that if you don't do anything in 10 years, then everything goes to waste, right? But I'm also thinking sort of from a trauma perspective, I don't think you generated that anxiety. I think probably by talking, you gave her the space to share. And from a trauma standpoint, when they start naming, first of all, sharing, right? And knowing she can talk to you and have that space. But also naming, right? I feel fear. And sometimes, although we can feel, what do I do now? But even that blessing, I can tell, right? I can tell that you feel scared. And that validation, it's priceless. And then you go, let's look for help. Let's look what we can do. How can we give you a way to feel at ease. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's who's been through trauma knows that there is nothing worse than not naming.
yep.
Well, thank you for the great presentations. So I think I also feel kind of like with Ophelia. And my question is about the balance between giving them the awareness and, the awareness of the dangers, and don't terrify them. I also have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. And when I was little, I got lost. I was really little, and I was like 2. And I remember everything, and I think I still have dreams about it. So my biggest fear is to lose my children. So, and I realize I am traumatizing my daughter, and I'm super conscious about this. I don't let her go anywhere without her phone. I have 360. I follow her everywhere she goes. And she's getting anxious about it, but I can't stop myself. So when you were talking, I was like, okay, I'm damaging my kid. But maybe you can elaborate more about, a little bit about that balance, right? The awareness and how to stop ourselves. So you said a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think what to say is the tricky question. And I don't think, I learned so much from the mothers. So for the last 10 years, I've been working a lot with families of soldiers who've gone to Iraq and Afghanistan and gone off to fight for our country. And usually it's the father goes, the mother stays behind. And we would do workshops as parents were preparing to separate. And the parents would say, what do I tell my child? But the issue, and of course it depends on their age, right? What do they understand is more the question. And also, what are their sensitivities? And what are your sensitivities based on how much you tell them? But also, in this day and age, your children are going to find out things from other people, right? And so, the little boy who went to school, kindergartner, and his teacher made some mention of the fact that his dad was in Afghanistan, and so at recess, they said to him, does your dad shoot and kill people? And then another kid said, is your dad going to get killed? I mean, on the playground at 5 years old. But that's what happens. So we have to be prepared to address these issues, but we have to figure out what's the right level for the child, for what the child can understand. So in that case, the mom might say, look, you can't say, no, I promise Daddy will never die. You can't ever say that. That's a terrible thing because you can't, right? But you can say he's, there's a lot of things being done to make sure that they're safe. And, it's true that Daddy does have a gun to protect, but it's, a lot of soldiers don't shoot their guns. Or when it comes to getting lost, I think talking about your kids already know that you're terrified of them getting lost, because otherwise they wouldn't be so scared, right? So I think talking about it and just saying, it was pretty scary for me when I was a little girl, and every single child is scared of getting lost from their parents, separated from their parents. I mean, that's why what's going on is so terrifying in terms of separation of children at the border and here, because that is a child's pretty much their worst nightmare, that they will lose their parents. So it's not surprising, but I think normalizing it, everybody has that fear. And I actually got lost, and maybe there was some other aspects of it that you got found again, right? So that's a good thing. So, I think we have to create our own narratives. I think being scared to talk to kids, that's very, very difficult. It's interesting that we had this talk about, Franco of Spain, and sort of, this sort of idea of not talking is what perpetuates trauma often.
Well, since we have to keep our schedule on time, so I would just like for all of you to just give a final applause for our 3 great presenters for today. Thank you so much.